Welcome to APH's Access Academy webinar, and we are excited to continue our series today called The Road Ahead. With employment rate for individuals with visual impairments being approximately 37% and really being almost unchanged for decades, we are focusing our time and effort to bring you content on how educators can essentially move beyond those triaged transition planning moments with the ultimate goal of changing the trajectory for all students. Today's feature is career readiness for elementary students, and we will hopefully help you to understand what is meant by career readiness for this age group and identify ways that you can work more effectively with stakeholders and embed those skills within the expanded core curriculum. Presenting today. Today, we are so fortunate to welcome back presenter Erika Fundelius. Erika is a teacher of students with visual impairments, a certified orientation and mobility specialist, and a doctoral degree student at Florida State University. She has worked in education in many different positions, ranging from preschool teacher, paraprofessional, K-5 educator, and now into that teacher of students with visual impairments. And she did all of this before moving to Tallahassee, Florida from California. She is passionate about what she talks about, which is why we are excited to have her with us today, sharing about this topic. She enjoys working with people, talking about empowering our students with self-determination and self-advocacy, and just working with general education teachers. Also presenting today is Nan McMillan. She is a teacher of students with visual impairments and an orientation and mobility specialist as well. She serves students pre-K through the 12th grade in Hillsborough County, Florida. She's very busy as well, adjunct professor for Florida State University Visual Disabilities Education Program. And just like Erika, you will see her being passionate about what she talks about. She loves encouraging independence, especially in early education years through adapted classroom and also other home routines. Lastly, our learning objectives. Here's what you can expect to learn today. You will be able to walk away with being able to better explain to stakeholders the importance of career readiness for elementary school children. That might include independence and clothing, feeding. This includes organizational skills, time management, being a community member, and of course, that self-advocacy and self-determination. Also, you will be able to identify age-appropriate avenues for career readiness. Maybe that might even be a part of writing short stories of people in their lives, interviewing them. And lastly, you will be able to embed career readiness skills into all areas of the expanded core curriculum, emphasizing that we want to develop good academic skills and understanding the value systems that we all have in our lives. So that is what we have in store for you today. I'm eager for the learning to begin.
Thank you, Amy. What a lovely introduction and explanation of our learning objectives. Welcome back, everyone. We are glad that you're here and hope that we are going to be able to give you information that you can take with you in your toolbox. So as always, if you have been with us for the first 2 webinars of the 5 series, I want to center our time on this quote from Dr. Wolf, which says, quote, "Never do for a child what you believe that a child has the potential to do. Anticipate that they can do, make them prove that they cannot. Begin by assuming that they can." It is essential that always keep this in mind as we begin our work. So let's define career readiness when it comes to elementary school age children. Elementary school is the time when we have this foundation for developing academic skills because, in preschool, we work mostly on social. Now we're tapping into academics as well as vocational skills. And if you were with us last month, we focused on our school presentation, on preschool presentation around the facilitation and the use of play as an instructional medium, because children's work is play. Play is the foundation for well-rounded development across domains, such as social skills, which later, of course, turn into soft skills for work. And we discussed how play can be a bridge to academics as well, learning about jobs. We should remember, I would like you to remember that elementary school age children are children and they need to continue to play. With all that said, let us dive into our first competency. Oh, actually, into our stakeholders. Sorry, I am skipping forward in my head. As we begin this conversation today, we must acknowledge the fact that beginning with kindergarten, PSVIs often fall back into being tutors of academics, or as my husband likes to call it, accessibility machines. And I would like to challenge us to all to stop. We really need to be intentional with what we are doing, and that is keeping our focus on the end goal, working ourselves out of a job by giving tools to our students while utilizing the ECC, because we are teaching to the adult. We need to envision the person they will become. And hopefully, we all can see an independent, autonomous, and productive person when we look at our students. So the most important stakeholder in this process is the student. And we have to ask them. They are 6 to 11, so they should have some concepts ready to go, right? Do you know what your caregivers do for work? Do you know what I do for work? Do you know what you might want to do when you grow up? Or do you know what skills are necessary for your dream job? We need our parents to understand that we are doing and trying to accomplish, because we need their buy-in. Nan was focusing on this in our preschool presentation, that we need them to be able to be successful in our work with administration. And ultimately, if we could just get most of our students to hold a job, Amy was mentioning the persistent unemployment of our students. If we could get them to hold a job, and utilizing this new wave of activism that's going on in society currently all around the globe, then society would benefit as well, right? For many reasons. Society, of people of society, they could learn about empathy. We could potentially eliminate ableisms, and also change this medical and social model of disability that ultimately holds the barriers for all people with disabilities. The way we ensure we embed ECC is by really just understanding whose job is it anyway? And of course, being intentional about it. Because ECC is our best practices, yet many times we write goals, for example, for typing, but do not think through how it could bridge across ECC. However, if we stop and think, we could write about the future and explore the world as our students type. If we recenter our thinking on how the 9 areas of ECC do actually intertwine, then a typing goal can include independent living skills and O&M, such as typing up a shopping list and recipes, compensatory, creating calendars, task lists, maps, and of course, career education by having a child read a book or do research on an area they might be interested in, and then typing it. Through our intentional instruction, we can cover not just academic goals of grammar, spelling, literacy, Braille, or otherwise, and using their AT, so we're covering tech skills, using the internet, so we're teaching them social interactions and safety, orientation, mobility for shopping, and money skills, all by typing goal. And so once academics enter this arena and testing becomes the main focus, we do not lose sight of the importance of the 9 areas of the ECC. It is simple. It is all up to whether or not us adults are willing to step outside of ourselves and embrace that transdisciplinary team approach that many of us do not always have a chance to practice because we're itinerants, right? We just kind of like ships passing in the night. But if we could, at least us VI people, embrace a transdisciplinary approach and practice appropriate role release and stop guarding our areas, then we can strengthen our students' understanding. And here we go to those competencies that I was jumping ahead in my brain. And so let's take a look at that.
Hi, thank you, Erika, for starting us off. So today I'm going to, when I speak on my competencies, I'm going to talk a lot about through the eyes of me as a teacher. Actually, one of those itinerant teachers with a student that I've had through kindergarten to second grade. And the very foremost thing I've seen with this student and many other elementary students is communication skills. With this student in particular, because she had a medically, a condition that caused her to see a lot of doctors and things like that. A lot of times my students do not always make the best friends, in the sense that they're very standoffish. They don't always look up, they mumble, things like that. So one of the very first things I worked on in kindergarten with her is getting her head up, her eyes are at least face oriented to whoever she's speaking to, and definitely with her students. So when we had carpet time, if there was parent share, we're turning the body, we're getting active with that as an active communicator, which leads into the next competency of working. Yeah, sorry guys. Yes, next one.
Okay, so I advanced the slide, so we'll see what's going to happen.
Okay. So I'm just going to keep talking though. So the next competency we're talking about is working with individuals or in groups. And I think with this student in particular, I found with Jacqueline, I really needed to get her confidence up first as an academic student. So we're in pre-K, a lot of, the teacher did a lot of things. Her kindergarten and first grade teacher wanted to do a lot of things for her because she was visually impaired. And so working with the teacher, it helps get that adult assistance constantly out of the way. So maybe her classmates can be working with her. And so while that's building up her confidence that I can do this, I can be independent in these areas, it also opens the door building communication skills and those working skills together. When Jacqueline got a piece of technology, she got a CCTV that also opened a lot of doors for her, that she was able to access not just the board, but sometimes we would have a student sit next to her instead of a carpet time, so she could have her parent share while I stood in the background and kind of just prompted things to go along. And which leads me into the next one. So this is one of my favorite ones to teach. And with Jacqueline, I took the literacy approach to this because at the end of the day, the one thing I have found is the biggest issue, is especially with my low vision students like Jacqueline, is that incidental learning. So when a student, for those who may not know, a student who with low vision specifically, we see this the most, and definitely blind, we are learning constantly through vision. We're observing, we're seeing, we're hearing, we're using all of our senses. So when a student who has a visual impairment is missing that sense, a lot of gaps can happen. And when you add us living in a rural area, lack of ability to get out into the outer community, you are going to see these gaps in an understanding of what is a construction worker, or what does a farmer actually do, even though, yes, we do live in the strawberry fields, and things like that. So I love using books. I love having her write about things. What do you know about it? What do you know about a construction worker, or what even a movie star does, or what does a bank teller do? And writing in that role. Sorry, I'm out of school, everyone. Sorry about that. And getting her to use those academic skills while also learning in her own guided way how to all these different roles that are out there. And we do a lot of reading. We watch a lot of videos that are age appropriate, which then leads into her recognizing the role, the other community workers out there. As an O&M instructor, I found I do a lot of big to small that identification. So I find that looking at where does this person work? Okay, so let's say we're talking about a police officer. Okay, where does a police officer work? Out in the community. Well, is there a place that you know that you might be able to see a police officer? Well, they drive a car with things on it. So even if the student can't necessarily read exactly what's on that car, there's usually some bigger identifying features that help them. So then when they approach and they see more of that, hopefully if they don't have any color blindness with the blue, they can see that beautiful navy blue and know it's a safe person. Same thing when we're at a grocery store, it's identifying those main places to associate with somebody who has a job. And this continued also though with reading to get outside of just the community, her small community, and out into the bigger community of even just Hillsborough County. So back to a construction worker, you know, I see that yellow crane, I know construction worker. I see that bus, that Greyhound bus, I know that they also do yellow bus, that's a bus driver. So taking the bigger things and identifying those can also help when a student maybe doesn't have the best low vision for identifying a uniform or understanding a function based on those very minute pieces of detail. But if you can see the bigger picture and moving in closer as you go. And then, but the last but never least, the biggest one I find to be after communication, it starts in the moment we hit kindergarten, is organizational skills. This I will say is not just a student with a visual impairment struggle, but it is more of it's very extremely crucial that we start building that foundation. And Jacqueline, I love her to death, but this is one area that I actually did not realize until this year we really needed to work on, because kindergarten and first grade, her teachers provided her these nice little cubbies that were like, this is all science, math, this is all reading and writing inside her desk. And the moment those were taken away and she was given free range to have her organizational system, things were lost. We were having papers everywhere. We had books where they weren't supposed to be. Can't even find the books that she and I write together. So this is a big one that we need, because it also starts teaching them accountability. So when they get older and they're having technology that's not just sitting in their classroom every day and they're moving around like in middle school, this having organizational skills leads to that, which then of course leads into them holding a job, being able to be organized in time management and things like that as well. So before we move on, I'm very sorry.
You are certainly welcome to.
It's the end of the day. I promise
summer.
they're almost done.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I would like to leave you with a question before Erika picks up. Thinking about these areas, thinking about maybe some experiences you had when you were going through elementary school. Can you drop in the chat some ways that you were asked to be responsible, either at school or at home? And also I would like to see, like, with that, is that influenced your teaching at all, if for all my TVIs out there?
So we would love to hear from you. Terry mentioned classroom jobs, chores at home, feeding the dog. That's a great example. Managing a take-home folder, setting the table. A couple people have put that in. Watching a younger sibling, getting papers signed and brought back to school. These are some items that have been dropped into the chat. So I wonder at this point, then those items that are dropped in, have any of these items then influenced you in your teaching? Was that the question, Nan?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
So taking a moment just to do that reflection on your own teaching. Any of these elementary appropriate organizational skills or management impact you and how you provided instruction?
I think I will pick it up here. Thank you so much for sharing, and please continue sharing because we are watching this chat. So I will be pulling in whatever you put in there to make sure that we are covering. But one of the very interesting themes I see is, which I'm very thankful for, is there's a clear separation between what is school related and what is home related. And I'm kind of glad to see that chores are not something that we're completely shied away from, but I have some opinions on that in just a little bit. Getting out the tools you need for each class time, yes. So exactly, first getting them to school and then finding them in school and then having them organized to be able to find them and then being able to utilize them. Thanks, Marsha. So very good. So learning to be responsible. You just heard from Nan how for Jackie, communication skill intertwined with her ability to work in groups, and then how that ultimately, the more we work on these skills, will lead into the world of work for her. And all of these are learning to be responsible. And this begins at home. And we expect children to pick up themselves. If you were here with us for preschool, you know that cleaning up and picking up was the theme of that webinar. And we do the same thing for school. So as a K through 5 teacher, one of the many hats that I wore at one time, I was often very surprised or baffled, really, that's the note I wrote myself, by teaching the Friday afternoon routine of cleaning up your desk so you can keep, when you come back on Monday, then you can have a fresh start, right? It's kind of like a routine thing that lower elementary school teachers do. However, we never teach them how. We just kind of expect them to do it, right? Obviously, they do get the opportunity to practice, but we never really teach them. And when it comes to VI students, they don't have the visual of knowing what a nicely organized desk might look like. So when I had my own classroom, I actually gave all my students a organized desk picture, how it should look. You know, the books go on one side, and then where does the writing utensils go, and where does the coloring crayon box go? They had a picture. And when it comes to my VI students, you can clearly have a very easy tactile map of a clearly organized desk if they are Braille readers. And it's not hard to make one, right? But we need to teach them. So during our preschool webinars, I mentioned that I had 2 large drawers to keep my toys in as I was growing up. But as I aged, I learned how to keep the Legos that I kept in those big drawers back in their own boxes, and then how to stack them smallest on the top, right? And if we do not model, then or us teachers or the people around them are disorganized or, God forbid, messy, then expecting them to be organized is going to be kind of an uphill battle. And the same thing goes for timeliness. Even though some cultures do not have the same value system for time as we do across North America, when students begin to go to school, they get tardy for being neat. We'll see you around next time, Terry. The students get a tardy for being late. They need to learn how to set up their own systems to get out of the door in the morning, right? And that's all about being responsible. Next. Carrying over the idea of an organized desk, we can easily teach problem solving, right? How should those materials be organized and then to facilitate independent student success? So instead of me as a teacher giving the student a picture of how an organized desk should be based on my idea, how about we take the students' input into consideration, right? So we must aim for our students to solve their own problems, and that can be an organized desk. And I wanted to share just really quickly, when I was raising my stepdaughter, who is typical, she was 5 years old, and on a regular Saturday morning, she was allowed to watch a cartoon for 30 minutes while she had her breakfast. And she spilled her chocolate milk. And she had a very interesting emotional reaction to that. But instead of yelling or swooping in to fix it for her, I handed her a dish rag to wipe it up. Now, of course, this led into nearly a month-long experimentation on her part to see how often I'm going to have the same exact reaction. But every time I would just either say, have a verbal prompt of, what you need to do, or simply just point to the paper towel. And to save my own sanity, there was a plastic cover on the tablecloth and an area rug under the table, because it has become a testing ground for her. So, but after a while, I didn't have to solve it for her. So that was a tool that she was able to do. Okay, if I spill something, I'll just clean it up. I'll do whatever I can, paper towel, etc. And we teach these skills in preschool. But what happens is, all too often, BVI kiddos get a slide on this. We swoop in, we help, we deploy the fairy godmother, and we rob them of the opportunity of the essential life skill of just simply cleaning up a spill. Next. Kindergarten and first grade ushers in this era of reading tasks that have a very strong focus on directions. Children need to read the directions for coloring sequences, for basic math, and then slowly begin to learn larger, more complex tasks. They need to remember to get their homework folder out. You guys just mentioned that in the chat. They need to be able to know where that folder goes when they bring the paper into school, where they pick up the folder. It's always an inbox and an outbox. They need to know where those go. They need to be able to sit in their designated seats. And by upper elementary, they need to know how to handle their homeworks. They need to be able to communicate if they missed homework. It should not be mom calling the teacher. And they need accommodations for complex directions. Think science classes. Using those beakers and microscopes were always the bane of my existence as a VI teacher. But you can make it work, right? And then there's physical education where the rules matter. And those are complex directions. Next. Communication skills are often talked about, and Nan already mentioned interpersonal communication when it comes to Jackie, because our society values this skill. It often goes along with first impressions, right? I do have to tell you that this is highly cultural and culturally dependent, okay? In many other languages, other than American English, there are built-in honorifics that are related to grammar structures and forms of language. I grew up with a language that has no pronouns, and to this day, they trip me up. I also would never greet my grandmother with a hello. It's just not customary, right? So all this to say is just to please check with the students' families and culture before we force our, I'm going to sound really controversial, Eurocentric communication norms on our students. So yes, they do need to learn what is appropriate in this culture, but do we really need to force them to make eye contact when their culture says that's disrespectful? Can we find a middle ground? So that's where teamwork really works. That's where we need our parents' buy-in, right? If we don't have that relationship and we just force our own will, then it's not going to work. And it's not going to work for them on the long run either. So we just need to be mindful, but also intentional. Chores are not abusive. That was my note for myself for this slide. And I'm so glad to see that in the chat you mentioned chores. Yes, chores are necessary. In many cultures, children are expected to be productive members of the family from an early age. There will be households where the children will go and work. Maybe not in the United States, right? But even though there are areas within the United States, rural areas, where they are expected to work during harvest, right? So we have to keep those things in mind. I have very strong opinions coming from an Eastern European country on chores and how what expectations children should have. And that's some of the things that I need to reflect on as a teacher, because, you know, I cannot assume that whatever I feel is important or necessary or culturally fits my understanding is going to fit for another family. So quick little background, 20 years ago when I arrived into the US, I nannied in Los Angeles, just next to the Kardashians. So I have regularly picked up 14-year-old kids' towels from the ground as their nanny when I first arrived, because they were not expected to do so, because they always had somebody else to do it for them. So now that I live in Florida, Tallahassee, at literally the foot of Florida State University, there's no surprise that there is garbage on the street, that children, 18, 20-year-old college students have their dogs, but they don't pick up after them. And people toss their garbage out the door, out of the driving car, because somebody else will take care of it, right? But have you ever seen the hardest working people in a school, middle school, high school, even elementary school, is the custodians? Because children are not expected to pick up after themselves, or the trash falls next to the trash can, so I'm just going to leave it there because somebody will pick it up, because mom always does, right? So those are things that we need to, again, I'm kind of getting on I totally went off my script, so forgive me. It is completely chores, has to be age appropriate, with adequate task analysis and adjusting to the needs of the culture of the family. We can make them work. All right. And then understanding the rewards of work. And I see that Janelle said that my kids work at Harvest. Fabulous. How about if we could make our students with visual impairments use that opportunity to explore what the farm is, right? When you take that week off, that's one of the things I learned when I moved to the South, that we start so early because we take off a week in certain states still for harvest. So yes, we need to do them. So also, we all work for a reward. It's called paycheck, right? Again, it's culturally relevant. Some places, you're expected to do stuff, right? Because you are a part of a microcosm of your family. And then there are some cultures where you can earn money for cleaning up your room. Use those tools that the family is using for their typical children, or how they operate within the home, and then transfer that skill over to the school. And then we also get grades in school. As a doc student, I'm going to tell you, and a perfectionist, which is why I'm here, it's really not fun to not get an A when I put a lot of time and effort in it. But at the same time, it's not very challenging when I get an A and I didn't put all the work in that I should have put in. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but it is a currency while we are going through school. And this is another area of concern for our students with BI, because they often get rewarded just for turning in something and not for quality work. And that perpetuates the low expectation cycle for them. And the world of work does not look up highly on just turning in something. And then also an area that I want to just quickly explore is how we turn our students into being praise dependent by fostering their dependence with the fairy godmother syndrome, and then giving them extrinsic rewards versus the good, valuable intrinsic forms, right? There are theories about incentive theory of, what is intrinsic and extrinsic, and I could go on forever because I'm a psych nerd. But if you're interested in it, look into any applied behavioral analysis, a little Bandura with social learning theory, and you will have a blast if you're at all like me. But I do have to point out, I bet, and we have 91 people on this webinar, I bet that at least 75% of you have bribed a child to eat their vegetables for an exchange of a favorite dessert afterwards. And please drop in the chat what your favorite dessert is, because I need inspiration for the weekend. I'm serious, though. Yes, chat in ice cream for me. Oh, chocolate cake. There you go. Somebody's listening. So intrinsically motivated behaviors are performed because we have a personal satisfaction, right? We make that cheesecake or strawberry shortcake, grass-fed vanilla. I'm coming to you, and I have 3 days off. Fruit salads, okay. So we have that intrinsic drive that we want tiramisu. Oh my God. Okay, thank you. So the reason at 47 years old, I'm still in school is because I love learning. It's a challenge. I like to be challenged. I like to stretch. And so because that intrinsic motivation, and we somehow have to find and tap into that for our students. And then lastly, real quick on basic academic skills, and thank you for all those lovely pies. Is it sweet cherry or sour cherry though? I wanna know. And academic skills, of course, all about elementary school is academic skills, right? And this is the time when we as TSVIs have to do a really, really, really super duper job on learning media assessments, because it really sets us our students up for success when choosing a reading or writing medium. Now, that doesn't mean that this initial decision or choice cannot be changed later on, but we do need to set them up to learn practical and efficient methods that can carry them across into their careers, let that be college or a job. So when third grade hits, learning shifts, right? We are no longer learning to read, we're reading to learn. The syllables in a word get longer. I can't even pronounce them. And then the simple additions, for example, for math that you can complete on your hands become long divisions, right? And geometry. So if we don't give them the basics, they are not going to be able to succeed. And here we are introducing you to another book if you were not familiar with it. It's Miss Carol Castellano's book on the title is Getting Ready for College, begins in third grade. And she warns something about academics. And she says, quote, children with VI read at a slower rate. Quote, it's typical for BVI children to be behind. Quote closed. Quote, child should be in a resource room to accommodate slower pace and personal attention. Quote closed. She warns us as TSVIs and as parents not to fall into these pitfalls. They don't have to be true. It is how we set them up. So rather than slowing the pace, we can offer them non-visual skills and additional skills that can get them through successfully. And now over to Noon.
Thank you, Erika. And I would like to just say, as an active TVI, and you made me laugh with the access machines. It is very true. And talking about pitfalls, it's very easy to get in those. So that's why I love being an O&M specialist. If anybody's ever thinking about going and getting your certification, I highly suggest it, because I find it's given me the opportunity in some of these activities we're gonna touch on to get out of being an access machine and really getting my kids out there learning. But I'm still supporting academics, because really at the end of the day, if you can get a kid out in the world, you're building concepts, which is really what we're all trying to do. So with that, field trips. This is probably one of the most successful things. I will love to give a shout out to my county. We, not of course this year, but we have something called JVIB, which is Junior Visual, very important, or JVIP, basically very important people. That's also visually impaired program, but for our little nuggets. And what we do is at least once a month, we go out into the outer community. Like for example, we had a big bridge being built And we knew my cousin was on the project. We also had somebody who was a neighbor of a manager for it. And we took our kids on the field trip to sit in all those machinery. They got to see all the big steel things that go at barbs, things that go into the concrete, all sorts of stuff. And that builds a concept, and it builds their understanding of a new job, and not just construction worker, but to build a bridge, we have to have somebody work in the office, somebody to do the money, somebody to answer the phones, somebody that's drawing things as well. Those are really important skills, because when they get older, those experiences help you. Like, now that I work with also older students, we talk about like, okay, well, if you might want to work in building things, but maybe you don't have the accommodations aren't appropriate to be, say, an architect, but that doesn't mean you can't work with those type of projects. Here's some other jobs surrounding it. So building those concepts, getting out of just the grocery store, as I say, is really important. So this is actually a picture of some students. We went to an urban farm and we got in there, found worms, all sorts of fun stuff. And I will say that my nuggets, they still bring this up. Even this was a year and a half ago, talking about it when we've read books. Jacqueline loves to bring up and say like, hey, we saw that, or that's what that farmer did. Those are reasons why we do it. And because also it helps with her reading comprehension and things like that later on, if you want to tie it into a more academic reason. And next. And then another thing I love to do is bringing VI students or my students with typical peers or other disabilities together and working on group projects. So we did this for Earth Day, where I went out, they made the list. Well, we read a book about how to plant and all about Earth Day and all this stuff. And then we brailled, we wrote on our iPad, we made a list. Miss Nan went out. I even recorded a video so they could see me, because of COVID. We're not doing really off things, but I recorded where I went, who I talked to, things like that, and then brought it back to them. And we got to not just reflect on the group project and who poured in the dirt, whose responsibility was what, but also the first steps of what that looked like. So I talked to somebody out in the garden section. I talked to also some random person who loves flowers and talked about what kind of potting soil do they think we need. So, and how that's a hobby, which is okay, and but there's still responsibilities even within a hobby to get the job done. So if we can go next. And then also another big thing I really enjoy doing is going out and mapping before you're gonna, when we can go out into the world, which hopefully is soon, mapping it out. And that can look like with this student, he is functionally blind. So we use a lot of the Wheatley board or tactile grid line paper, and we draw out a map. We figure out where we're going, what we're doing. So for example, he's earned to go to the zoo. Speaking of chores and things like that, we're using real money. He's earning his next field trip. But we map that out. We say, okay, I pull up a map and I use those specific language to help him so he can build an image. And then we're gonna bring this with us to see if we can adjust it. So when we come back after the field trip, we're reviewing it. And we'll talk about also I'm gonna bring things for the map to indicate, okay, well, we met the balloon guy here, or we met this lady who feeds the giraffes, but this person gives the giraffes baths and things like that. So we're building those concepts, we're bringing that O&M, and also it's a great way, it's an easier way for them to have that concrete thing to reflect back on, because we're learning with all our senses. So tactually speaking, I find that my kids being able to seek that out helps jog that memory very well. And then last but never least, I love doing a project and getting them out and about on their school campus. let them share what they did. So for example, Jacqueline made herself an eyeball here. We learned about the eye. We wrote all about her eye, things like that. And we painted it, we did the parts. And then she got to go out to classmates, her gym teacher, the office staff. And while we're there, we're also kind of talking about, okay, we're going to go see the principal secretary. What is that? Who is that? What does a principal secretary do? Do you think you could do that job? And things of that nature, while also working on self-determination and social skills and O&M and all sorts of other things with this one simple fun, what she thought was fantastic, making this massive eyeball. We hit so many areas of the ECC while also working on exploring other people on her campus, having a mini field trip around the school to learn what they do and who they are specifically. So going back to that, like safety in that role, who are the people I can go seek out on campus and things like that. So, and those are just a couple of activities I thought I'd bring up that even a TVI on campus could do, as well as somebody who's dual or just an O&M and a TVI working together.
Fabulous. Thank you, Nan. When I first saw that picture, I was like, that has to be an eyeball, but I wasn't sure. So yes, what a fantastic way to have that conversation. So we also wanted to leave you with a couple of specific tools and hints other than what we've already shared, but a little bit maybe more for in terms of what you could do when you're having these conversations with your students. Next. So conversations about careers, just like Nan mentioned about the school secretary, right, during an O&M lesson, should begin no later than in elementary school. And we know this, this is exactly why we are having a 5-webinar series, because the conversation is lifelong, right? It's a lifelong process. But some of the points that I would like to highlight, we got from a handout from the American School Counselors Association handout. It's titled Elementary Conversations, and there is a link to this document for you in our handouts that is on the APH website at Access Academy. So some of the principles that apply here, regardless of a disability or not, is that all students have the opportunity to explore interests, abilities, values, and goals with a certified school counselor. Are school counselors familiar with our BVI students? Likely not. So join them. Make it a mini field trip, right? And this can also be an exposure to a job. Maybe they like psychology, like I almost became one. So career development should also engage the student and the parents, because again, it's culturally dependent. It largely depends on how the parents and the students view their future, the student's future, right? And I supported my blind student through AP Physics. That was very painful. Economics, as well as mock trials, because he was thinking about mechanical engineering, because he's brilliant, right? But he's blind. And he ultimately decided with looking at engineering, but from a psychological point of view, and he's studying at Stanford. So I'm telling you, he's brilliant. But still, AP Physics and mechanics, let's just say as a TSVI who is not really good at physics, making that accessible was a very interesting experience. But you can make it. And I never told him he cannot do it, right? I didn't take that opportunity away from him. And then also including our community partners by offering opportunities for volunteering and internships for our students so they can figure out if they have the skills for the job or they don't, because they also need to know that if they don't have the skills, then they either develop them or they need to switch their thinking, right? And while we're working on this, we obviously have to acknowledge that career development is a lifelong progress, and it begins early on, just as Nan was talking about, exploring and understanding what people wear in uniforms and what kind of roles they fill in our community. All students have freedom for post-secondary training and career choice. Transition planning should not begin at age 16. Career planning and transition planning begins when the child starts school, because it's a consistently evolving process. And students have the right to change their minds, just like my student did, and just as I did. 47, still in school, right? There are some of us who are crazy like that. And I encourage you to encourage your students. I had a student who culturally was meant to be an accountant. Again, I was in California, right? So she was supposed to be an accountant, but she was an amazing artist. What she wanted to do is paint. She's low vision. And I encouraged her, fine, go do your accounting because that's what your parents want, but do a minor in art. Like continue, because that's going to be potentially your hobby, and maybe later on you can actually make money off it, right? She did amazing portraits. And career conversations should be primarily strength based, but we need to facilitate this exploration for our students, for their skill sets and what they might be interested in. And if we create opportunities, then they can make their own decisions. Next. These questions come directly from that handout. So we could ask when we are doing our ECC evaluations, tell me about what you do really well. What activities or clubs have you participated in at school? Sorry. What is the difference between a job and a career? How do you know you've done your best work? How does it feel? If you woke up one day and you were a scientist, what would you invent? Just fantasizing, thinking through and talking about these ideas can have them explore, right? And we can start it. And they align with ECC, self-determination, social emotional skills, career skills, explorations of these transition activities where we constantly have our students do interest inventories, right? We can answer those with these questions. And all these are available for you. And I will come to the chat. I see the questions, but I will leave you with the references first. So this time around, we pulled in a third reference, which is Carol Castellanos Getting Ready for College Begins in Third Grade, alongside the two Wolf documents and book that we have been using. And then now let's see those questions. So
I
you have talked about.
can answer one of the
of
the big questions. So, Rochelle, I hope I'm saying it right. I actually am currently working on this with an 11-year-old. So you were asking about how do you make that career readiness and intrinsic. So he's learning Braille, and we work towards an ultimate goal of the sense like he loves to cook, or we're working to go to the zoo, and every time we increase. Right now he's having to earn $3. So every time it's agreed upon, each time we move on to the next subcategory of how much he's going to earn for the new reward, which just like you and I, except maybe in a district, try to negotiate your salary. He gets to do that too. He also gets to negotiate how much, how much is a penny worth or 5 cents worth or things. So for every 2 sentences he reads, he gets a penny, because we have decided that he is up to that point where he needs to work a little more to earn that penny. And then at the end of every lesson, we sort our coins and we count them and we add them up, and we use some AT, maybe to use a calculator with some voiceover. But those are ways that I'm trying to build those beginning skills of both career readiness, independent living, while touching on compensatory and things like that. And I have found with adding real money instead of like a token system type, tickets or things like that, has been a lot more intrinsic to him, because he feels like he's actually paying me at the end of the day to get whatever he's earning. I will say it is very important to if you choose to do that and choose to do it in smaller increments. Like we first started with $1, that he understands that to make that meal is not worth $1. So that can lead into another conversation, but that's just kind of a way that I've kind of tried to answer your question in an activity that's very routine based that has helped.
Thank you, Nan. And then I will address this one last questions before we have to say goodbye. And that says, I have some students who are not very introspective. Any suggestions on fostering that? I find this that even college students who are in their 20s not very introspective. So I would suggest trying to do a journal activity that is expected of them to write about something and then really tap into feelings. I love books on feelings. I collect A to Z alphabet books. I have feelings, like three different books on feelings with A to Z, and having those and kind of working through feelings and then having a journaling activity, I think could help. And then use career education for it. Let's explore stuff and then refer back to self-determination of how would you make that happen? And then maybe see that could help with introspection. So with that said, I will turn it over to Amy.
Well, that was great, Nan. The examples that you gave us today, Erika, the enthusiasm and knowledge that poured out from you, it motivates me to want to learn more and to think about those action steps that can be taken to help foster this career readiness for our students. And this is just, you know what, we're still in the middle of our series. This was just 3 out of 5. So this is an invitation to everyone in our audience that I hope you will come back in June, that you can save the date for June 25th at the same time. We will be featuring career readiness for middle school students. And then in July, we approach career readiness for students who have additional impairments. So we thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you back again.